Save it. You may not want to do that later. First thing I want to say is that the world you live in, okay, that's better, is as full of shit as a Christmas turkey. All politics are corrupt all over the world, not just here. They're corrupt because if you try this, don't take my word for anything. If you ask a politician, how can you increase the agricultural yield? I don't know. How can you put an end to crime? They don't know. They don't have any idea. How can you increase transportation and lessen the accident rate? They don't know. All your problems today are technical, have nothing to do with politics. Politics was great 100 years ago, but it doesn't work anymore. There are lawyers and businessmen that have no answers to problems. I'm going to try to tell you that the language you've been taught in your schools is hundreds of years old. That makes it almost impossible to talk to one another. When you say something to somebody, it goes into their head and comes out a little different, because language is subject to interpretation. If you don't understand that, when you open the Bible, she says, this is what Jesus meant. She says, you're wrong. It meant this. Another person says, I think it meant that. So you got the Lutheran, the Seventh-day Adventist, the Catholic, because it's subject to interpretation. We are thinking in terms of developing a language that's not subject to interpretation. People don't even know that that's possible. Mathematics is not subject to interpretation. Chemistry is not. When a doctor prints a formula, a chemist anywhere in the world follows that exactly, not subject to interpretation. When two engineers get together and they want to build a bridge, they don't say, believe me, this material is strong as hell. They say the torsional strength is so much, compression and tension strength, and they give specifications. If bridge building was subject to interpretation, I can assure you they wouldn't last more than a week, a bridge. So it is possible then to develop language that's not subject to interpretation. So as long as you have this language, we talk at each other rather than to each other. Let me give you an example of that. Sometimes a person says, have a nice weekend. They never say, have a nice life. Why just a weekend? Our language is so terrible and so old that we don't know what the hell we're talking about. I mean that. Now, when a nation can't get along with another nation, or some people create problems, the senators make laws. The only laws that count is natural law. If you don't get enough sleep and nutritious food, you get sick. All man-made laws are strictly bullshit, because they have nothing to do with the conditions that generate aberrant behavior. They think, or they teach you, that some people are good, some are bad, some have a lot of incentive, some are lazy. All that's artificial, unreal. I want to tell you something about even serial killers are generated by your society. People that torture and rob are created by this society. Now, I'm sure most of you don't fully understand that. That means if you have two children and you play with a 4-year-old while the 7-year-old is standing there, that lower lip goes up like that. If you play with a young kid, if you have two children, you say, why can't you be like your sister? She puts everything in her place and you leave everything around and I have to pick up after you. That makes jealousy and envy in the family. A minister, a Catholic priest, said to me, I know two people from the same environment. One turned out to be a minister, the other a gangster. If environment is everything, how do you get those differences? Here's how you get the differences. If you treat one child differently than the other, you make jealousy and envy. If you pick up the baby and play with it and don't put the older child on your lap and the younger child and treat them both well, that's less of that. Somebody said, yes, but what about serial killers? Well, I'm sure you all heard of Jeffrey Dahmer, or most of you. There was a guy before Jeffrey Dahmer called Albert Fish. They believe he ate 45 children. The public wanted to tear him to pieces. And I just want to tell you what happened. A psychiatrist named Wortham said, don't kill him. And the public didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I want to try to find out what made him that way so we can eliminate those conditions. And this is what he found out. He found out when that fish was about 8 years old, he was touching his private parts, which is not unusual. His mother was an old-time Baptist. She said, you're going to burn in hell touching that part of your body. Well, the kid started to shake. What do you expect? You will burn eternally and be tormented forever. And the kid started to shake like that. And the mother said at 2 in the morning, she heard him screaming. And she came into the bedroom, and the kid stuck needles in his genitals because he didn't want to go to hell. Can you understand that? He used to take minority kids in the woods and tried to cut their genitals off to save them from hell. What do you think a soldier is? He's a guy that's given a lot of bullshit about a group of other people in another land, artificiality, showing Japanese raping women, pregnant women, gang raping her, beating her up, and the guys all enlist. All nations are corrupt. They all torture. They all rape. Every one of them. You can get that from any military records or books written about the war. So I'm trying to tell you, you live in a society where they condition you indirectly. You go to school, you learn to speak, but you don't learn how to live and relate and find meaning in your own life. You become a chemist, a doctor, or a biologist, or in a narrow discipline. So the pinheads are used to make war weapons. Scientists don't exist yet. If there were such a thing as a scientist, they would ask, what makes a criminal? How does the government operate? What does it base its decisions on? So if they stay in that narrow area, photography, optics, engineering, bridge building, they don't ask those questions. So there's no such thing as a scientist. In the future, we will generate people that know anthropology, sociology, seismographs, they know the weather conditions, everything, so they can share ideas with other people. This way they're limited. That's why scientific journals never touch the system. That's where all your corruption comes from, the system that exists. Policemen, for example, walk over and say, where did you learn to drive? Get out of that car. Let me see your credentials. Let me see your... In other words, they're bullies, most of them, not all of them. Most of them. That's what soldiers are. They're killing machines. We would take soldiers and send them back to school to teach them to become problem solvers, not killing machines.